Education is the one career, profession, opportunity that everybody is an expert in. Everybody has gone to school at least some point in their life, right? And so you can take some of those own experiences that you've had, those teachers that you remember, the opportunities that you've had in the past, and try to think of it in a different way with your own kids.
Most days I can teach all 3 kids in 1 hour everything that we need to learn for that day.
And then there's people who just let their kids run around in the woods all day. And even those kids, when they go back to school, do just fine. My feeling is that the place to start is with trusting your child. That they'll show you what they need to learn.
Aloha mamas, and welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom Room. This show is brought to you by the Maui Mama magazine. We're here to help you to connect and express and discuss those things that are on our minds during this pandemic time. And our motto is #Share Aloha, Not Corona. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, and this week's show is a hot topic. We've named it Creative Alternatives to School Due to COVID. But we're really going to give you helpful tips and insight to help your child, even if they're not in traditional school as usual, but particularly if you find your child has to do some distance learning at some point. We're also going to be sharing helpful information for parents who are maybe making a different choice of schooling due to the coronavirus situation. And we'll be talking to a mom who's the head of an online blended school, Hawaii Technology Academy, and their insight from teaching students and helping parents with online learning for years. And for those choosing an alternative school, we'll talk to the mama who wrote the book on homeschooling, Gail Nagasako. And then we also get some input from a modern homeschooling mom, Lori Beth Huck Aldridge, who's been helping parents navigate homeschooling for a number of years. And for this show, we're doing our Actions of Aloha segment at last, but not least, to end on a positive note with a free cooking school that these 2 surf moms started for parents and Keiki during the summer when we were all staying at home. Okay, so here's what's on parents' minds at this moment. Back to school time is just around the corner. Some families will choose in-person learning, whether they're public or private. And some would rather have more personal control over the situation in these uncertain times. And then other parents who need to work, like essential workers, are basing their decisions on the need to have their keiki in school. It is a very personal, nuanced decision, constantly changing with the information that we're getting from various agencies that we put our trust in. And there is enormous pressure to bring kids back to school for economic reasons, for social emotional well-being of the student. As this happens, we also witnessed California's 2 largest school districts starting with online-only school this fall. Some parents are looking at smaller class sizes at private schools. Some don't want to pay if the school goes remote. Some can't afford private since losing their jobs, which is something that happened to my family that we had to wrestle with. And then there are some that are looking at online options or homeschooling options and have to be creative for the first time to think about how to educate their child. So there's a lot of stress on everyone. What parents have been talking about a lot is the school models that give us an idea of the kind of in-person learning or online learning plans that the DOE or the Hawaii State Department of Education has put out. And teachers and the Hawaii DOE have been debating about what safe distance measures should be enforced. While I read this week in the New York Times that there's actually no scientific data yet on COVID transmissions in classrooms. And just this week, the Hawaii State of Teachers Association and the Hawaii DOE reached an agreement on something they've been debating over the safe distance of students in the classrooms. The agreement changed the directive from 3 feet to 6 feet, which was a relief for many teachers and parents. But as you may recall from our episode 8 show, we heard from a University of Hawaii communications theory professor who talked about the social bonding of an intimate exchange can only happen within a 3 feet distance. And the further the distance, the more formal your interactions become. Like at 12 feet, it becomes like you're giving a lecture to the people that you're talking to. Now, there's some parents who may choose to have more control during this pandemic time of uncertainty and maybe come up with their own solutions. So if you're wondering what's being floated around, here's a few creative options from some parents that I know, and they told me they wanted to remain anonymous. One parent said, I'm doing the Oak Meadow curriculum and supplementing with Singapore Math and Athena Academy. And that sounded like a very substantial combo curriculum to me. She had not homeschooled before, but she was wanting to. So she had already looked into options that interested her and fit her values of education. And here's an idea from a teacher friend of mine. She gathered with a small group of mom friends and said this: we're using an online curriculum, Acellus, and supplementing with one we created that is more holistic and experiential, including community service, trade skills, on-site science, and project-based assessment. We also hired a tutor to challenge them beyond the online curriculum. We are a group of 4 moms supporting the plan and schedule. Wow. I was totally impressed with this creative and sort of forced makeshift plan because I guess as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So as we're here in this situation and time, and as many families are creating their own plans, we thought we'd reach out to some experts. The Hawaii Technology Academy has been successfully teaching students and their parents since 2006 with blended learning, both online and in person. And I've got the head of school, Christy Federley, waiting to come into the Zoom room with us. So let's bring her in. Hi, Christy. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you're a mom, and you're also the head of the HTA, which is the Hawaii Technology Academy. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what moms would need to know about you to understand what you can tell us.
Yeah, so I have 2 boys. I have a 14-year-old going into high school, and then I have a middle school boy. And so my life revolves around boy things. Both of my boys are going to be going to HTA this next school year. And so we've kind of been going through that transition of they're actually coming out of a regular DOE school and we're going into a charter school. So I have my own fears about what that looks like moving into that role for myself. I've been a teacher actually on Maui for 12 years now. And so I've been familiar with the educational landscape here for a very long time. And I live in Kihei, so.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about the situation when the pandemic hit and we suddenly were all scrambling. You have children, you're a mom. And so how was that for you?
Yeah, it was, there's already that challenge of balancing everybody's schedule. And at first, it kind of happened right during spring break. And so we were like, okay, this is just going to be an extension of spring break. I guess we will figure it out. As a school leader, as things kind of got a little bit more intense with Zoom meetings, and I realized that I was in meetings for 4, 5, 7 hours a day, just locked on my computer, it kind of then became a realization of, oh my gosh, how do I balance this? My husband's an essential worker, so he was at work, right, the whole day. And so it definitely became I've never been a stay-at-home mom. I've always been either in grad school or working professionally. And so it kind of took this whole shift, right, in my thinking and how do I prioritize, right, taking care of my own kids, making sure that they're doing schooling that for me is super important, and also balancing a school and all of those students and their lives and making sure families and parents that I'm responsible for are doing well and okay. So it definitely felt like there was a lot. In terms of our own program, the transition with HTA, we were already blended, right? And so our families are already familiar with what that process looks like. And so I felt like that scramble there was less about how do we ensure that our students are getting content and moving forward than it was, okay, what do we do in the future? And how do we help other schools and teachers figure out how to do this? But it definitely was a big transition for our lives, for sure.
Yeah, that's why I really wanted to have you on here, because I think your information that you can impart to us is so valuable, because you have been involved in this blended school, running this blended school, and blended meaning it's virtual plus in person. if people don't know what that means. And so because you've been doing this since 2006 for 15 years, you guys really know what you're doing. So there was not a big transition as far as what many of us experienced as like, oh no, it's pandemic time and we don't know how to do this. So I thought we would talk about some of the things that moms and dads are really wondering, how can we do this? Because you guys have been doing it for the longest time. You know how to teach kids. And I've heard from many parents that I know that are in your school, the kids love it. They are happy. They learn. They're excelling, you know, where maybe they didn't excel before. And so you're doing something that we really need to know. So what can you share with us as far as the programs that are online, how we can interact with those, and parents helping their children to learn online?
Yeah, and so one thing that I always tell people is that education is the one career profession opportunity that everybody is an expert in. Everybody has gone to school at least some point in their life, right? And so you can take some of those own experiences that you've had, those teachers that you remember, the opportunities that you've had in the past, and try to think of it in a different way with your own kids. It does take taking your mom hat off and putting your teacher hat on and making that transition. And we even have parents in our program that actually have, you know, a baseball hat that says teacher, and they will put the hat on and they will just change the dynamics of how they're working with their kid. And so that it becomes this change in roles, right? Something that we caution our families on, and we do, you know, kind of a comprehensive learning coach is what we call our parents, a learning coach training to walk through how to do this, right? But a lot of it is taking what you already know, right? We all have different expertise in areas, right? I bake on the side, and so there might be opportunities where I can look at a math lesson and do a baking with opportunity with my kids, but really making sure that there's so much online, right? There's, you know, Khan Academy and IXL and all of these resources that we have. You can Google and watch a YouTube video, right, to learn pretty much anything. But the challenge is how do you really pull kids off of the computer, check for understanding, talk with them about what they're learning and what they're doing, and then give the opportunities for really manipulating some of that information, right? We don't want kids sitting on the computer for 8, 7, right, even 6 hours a day trying to digest and process information, because we know through education, right, you learn in a modality of different ways. And so however you can pull that information for your own, it does take a little bit of pre-planning, right, on the parent's role to kind of say, okay, look, it looks like for math, you're doing these lessons this week. What can I take out and take off of the computer and make a live experience for you, even if it's just having a conversation? But again, you know, every other profession, it's hard to be an expert in that, right? But in education, we are all experts in education. We have all learned something, whether it's in a classroom or it's working with an auntie, or it's, you know, learning hands-on something, that you can just take some of those pieces of how you've learned things and share them with your child. And that's the biggest thing, is that when we think about distance learning or we think about online virtual learning, so often we think about, okay, the content is in the computer. It is right here. That's where they're going to get all of it. And it is, yes, a lot of the content is there, but it's just like a textbook, right? You wouldn't want to hand your child a textbook and say, okay, read all 15 chapters. You're going to just absorb that, right? And so as many ways as you can to pull some of those pieces off, whether you're doing a blended or you're doing a virtual or you're doing, right, distance learning pieces, it does take a little bit more just processing and planning. And so we always tell our families, like, even if it's an hour on Sunday to sit down and just kind of look through so that you're ready to go and you can have those conversations when you're driving to the store or wherever it fits into your day, to pull out that content, to really check and make sure your child is absorbing it.
So we all, you know, had that sudden distance learning experience, which seemed to not work very well. So what is the difference between what you do and what we had to do, and how can we learn from what you did so we don't have that Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, and so our number one is relationships, right? And you know, I've presented at conferences and had all these great conversations just about how to build relationships through a blended environment, which you would think we only see our students on a typical week 2 or 3 times a week. In HTA's growth, I saw my students once every 3 weeks because I was traveling to all of the different islands and teaching on each island. But it came down to that. How do you build relationships and connect with people through this virtual landscape? And I think even when the pandemic happened, my own students were, in a traditional DOE school, and I had no idea what they were doing. It was so frustrating for me as an educator and as a mom. Yeah, because of my own kids, and I would go on their, Google Classroom and ask, like, what are you guys working on? And like, well, we don't have to do it anyway. And so I think that was the big disconnect, right? Is that it was this enrichment opportunity, which at the time functioned because there was nothing else, right? Schools, the DOE, we didn't know, unless you're in a blended learning program, right? We didn't know what the next step was going to be. We didn't know how long schools were going to be closed, right? And it was kind of this ongoing wait and see what happens. I think the biggest difference is, right, our students, we are a school of choice for our students, for our families, and for our teachers. And so we have the highest retention rate for teachers because our teachers want to be with HTA, right? And so when you make that choice to be part of the HTA Ohana, you are all in. And so building those relationships with students, taking the time to meet one-on-one, whether it's via Zoom or it's checking in on campus, to really just create that connection is the biggest, right? The content, all of those pieces, we really believe that those come after you have the relationship and the trust, because we want our students to trust and build that relationship so that they can make mistakes, so that they can challenge themselves, and so that they're not fearful of, right, repercussions or getting a bad grade or all of those pieces. And so I think that that's the biggest difference between what happened in the pandemic when schools were unsure about the next step and what's been kind of the opportunity of our program over the long term. I think the other big piece of that is we are constantly doing what's best for students. And so if that means we have to change something tomorrow because it's not working, we will change it tomorrow, right? And so some of that you have to be able to be a little bit flexible, right? Because we might start, one program or one piece of something and realize this is just not working. Let's change it and make it better. And so I think that that's another piece, is that we'll take student input, we'll take teacher input, we'll take families input, and really refine to ensure that we're doing what's best.
So with this pandemic situation going forward in the fall, if we get to this point where we have to do a lot of virtual learning, how do you think we can socialize, or there's that connection of socialization that we know is all really important, and you've done that in blended learning. Is there a plan that you can share with us that maybe we could borrow and utilize too?
Right, we're in this pandemic, and so just the opportunity to broadcast and to share and collaborate, I think is something that we haven't seen before, right? We've always kind of had technology as this resource, but we haven't had to or had the need to really dive into it. And so that's definitely something that we're growing within our program too, is just the opportunity to do, we've had kids sign up for the house party app and like do house parties with each other. And in our advisory classes, like pulling in different resources, because there is that concern of, I know everyone reads the news, and you can see, even on just Facebook, just all of the other schools that are trying to open and having students in groups and things like that maybe might not be the next best step. We don't know, right? We're still working on what that plan looks like. But I think just the opportunity to be creative and innovative, and again, what works best for students. We tried to do like a middle school field day at the end of last year, and we had different Zoom rooms, and they each had a different theme, and the kids got to go in and participate in different activities and do different things. And so just being creative, I think, is important.
I know you talked about it really being important to have accreditation. And so can you tell us a little bit about that when you choose a school?
Yeah, and so something that I'd noticed, right, even just within the Maui Mommies group is, the fear, right, of sending our kids to a campus and not knowing what that looks like. And, I think as schools are opening up across the country, we can definitely see some of the repercussions to that, right? And so the understanding of wanting to pull your student out and do a homeschool program is definitely a relevant concern. I think as a teacher and as an educator, I do have a couple, right, like red flags that pop up for me. My expertise has been in high school. And so one of the big things is if you have a high school student or even a middle school student moving into high school and you're thinking about doing a homeschool peer program, just making sure that it's accredited, because we have definitely seen students who, the Department of Education has a list of just a few schools that they'll take credits from and count towards a high school diploma. And so if you have a student, let's say you do this whole year and you choose to do a homeschool program, and they're not earning the correct accredited credits, then they would actually have to restart the year if they were to go, back to their traditional school or even a charter school, 10th grade. And so then they would have to start over. And we've definitely seen that happen to students. And so my recommendation would be, all of the DOE schools are being required to offer a virtual opportunity. And so I would say go with that opportunity, especially if you're not sure about what program to use and you haven't done homeschooling before, because as a homeschooler, that all the curriculum, everything is on the parent to provide, right? If you're still connected with the school and you're choosing to do a virtual, which isn't the homeschool option, you're choosing to do a virtual option, a distance learning option with the school, they're then required to support and provide the curriculum. If you choose to do homeschool, you're still connected to that school. But once you say homeschool, then you're required, right, to provide the curriculum, to ensure that the courses are accredited, and there's minimal support, right, in that sense. And so, there are a few online programs that we often refer families to, like Penn and Foster and Keystone Academy, that are accredited schools that the DOE will take most of their credits. But I would highly recommend making sure you talk with your students, their current school, especially in high school, to make sure that the program does, right, add the credits, because you would hate to have your student repeat a whole year. But the fear is legitimate. I know Kihei Charter is the other charter school on island, and they're full. I think they're at max capacity with waiting list as well. We do have waiting lists, and our enrollment closes July 1st. However, in this next, not this current school year, but the next school year, 21-22, we are expanding our facility to allow to hopefully meet some of the needs of the families on Maui too. We are a statewide charter school, so all of our campuses are actually at capacity this current coming school year. But I would just caution against jumping into pure homeschool without at least talking to the school counselor, to the register at the high school, and making sure that some of the credits, if it's a high school student, even middle school student, are aligned. And again, even in elementary, once you become homeschool, it is on the family, right? Unless you find an accredited or an elementary program, which is a little bit easier to find because you're not searching then for the credits, but there are opportunities out there.
If we don't have people enrolled in public schools, then our public school system suffers. So could you just briefly talk about that?
Yeah, so the funding is the big issue, right? And already within the state of Hawaii, we are looking at cuts, right? Potentially to the education system, to the service sector from the governor's side of things. And so even just looking at those cuts, as a school, we've already been told that the student allocations are going to be drastically less this incoming school year, because they're trying to balance and make sure that there's equitable funding for all programs. As a teacher, I definitely have teacher colleagues at other schools that have already been shared, that from their administration, that there's going to be cuts, right? Because if students leave, if large numbers of students choose to go homeschool, that student is no longer, right, enrolled in that school, and the funding for schools is per student, right? And so this whole nationwide, right, exit of public education it makes a drastic hit. And already within Hawaii, right, our education system has been, I would say, poorly funded over the past, and there's been consistent growth to try to even just raise teacher salaries to a substantial, livable wage. And so as families are making that decision, do understand that it does impact, right, the enrollment for the school, which impacts the positions that the school can offer, which in turn would then end up laying off teachers and, support staff and all of those roles as well.
Mm-hmm. As I was reading on the website, the UNESCO website, it says the world is changing and education has to change. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's an opportunity. I think, as an educator and in an innovative school, and I've always been within innovative programs, education's needed to change, right? Like, we've kind of had the same system since the 1800s in terms of the 5-day-a-week program, and the students go and they sit at the desk and this is what it looks like. And so it is an opportunity, right, for other schools to really start to identify. Colleges and universities have been offering blended opportunities for students for, it's grown in popularity over the last 10 years. Students can take classes with Stanford. We have students who are taking classes with Harvard that are doing summer programs and things because that's been an opportunity. I think schools are just catching on. And so the opportunity for us to grow as a whole system of education, because of the pandemic, it kind of lit the fire, right? But I think that it's an opportunity. And so even with HTA, we've been doing and working with schools across the state on how to do blended learning. We've run teacher courses and everything over the summer just to help support everybody, because again, we are one school, but we are one state, we're one nation, we're one world. And so it is everybody's job to ensure that our students are receiving an equitable education. And so, yes, we're one school, but we are trying to share our wealth of knowledge to everybody so that, other schools can start to pick up on some of these innovative practices that we've been doing. Yeah, I would say for sure, having been part of kind of this reopening of schools planning process, even through over the summer, we're inching our way, right? I know several of you have read about the Board of Education, right? Kind of pushing back on the DOE's reopening of school plans. And ultimately, I know in talking with directors across the state and administrators and principals across the state, like our number one concern is our student and teacher safety, right? And making sure that schools are safe and making sure that we are, using all of the cleaning protocols and sanitizing down schools. I would say right now schools are probably the cleanest that they've ever been, which is exceptional. But I do want parents to take a deep breath and know that that is at the forefront of our minds as we're looking at reopening schools. And we also understand, and as a parent, this is also on my shoulder too, is we also have to work. And what does that look like? And what resources are available to families if they have to go back to work full time and students are virtual full time? And so all of these groups and all of the concerns are definitely on our plates, and we're working to balance what's best for everybody. And so we are all stepping through this with grace, right? And so I keep telling my own kids and myself every day, we're like, okay, we're at quarantine day 100 and something, but we're going to do our best today. And so I think that even if you're homeschooling and you're trying to figure out distance learning and virtual, take a deep breath, because our kids are resilient, right? They're going to come out of this and they're going to lead the future into amazing opportunities. And so take a deep breath, do the best that you can, but don't stress, right? Because our students and our kids, they are going to do well, and they are so smart already. And again, we're all experts. Everybody is an expert in teaching and learning about things. And so just take that expertise with you.
So thank you so much for being here. Maybe we'll see you again, because there's so much changing in this, this whole landscape of what's going on here. So we might invite you back again. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Where are you zooming off to now? Are you going to zoom off to your kids?
Yeah, I think so. I've been working, so I think we're going to go bake something.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much. Okay. So our next Zoom guest is Lori Beth Aldridge, and she has been helping parents navigate homeschooling, the modern homeschooler. Let's bring her in. Hi, Lori Beth. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. You have so much information I want to know. So first, tell us about your mom, you have kids, and what you do.
I'm Lori Beth Aldridge. I live in Kula. I'm a mom to 3 girls who are, as of today, 6, 4, and 3. My husband and I run a renovation business. I do the design and he makes it come to life. I am also the creator and host of a podcast called Elevating Motherhood that actually features a lot of amazing Maui mamas. Oh. And I also have a blog called Yaya Mamas. And I kind of started to move out of the blog space and into more of the conversation and podcast, but the message is all the same, just supporting moms, resourcing them, making them feel heard and understood, and creating a sisterhood and motherhood too. I also teach homeschool workshops. I teach people how to start homeschooling at homeschoolexplained.com. So yeah, that's what I do.
Do you not ever sleep? I mean, I don't know where you put in all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I also write. There's so many things I do. We have a small farm. I mean, I could just go on and on, but I get that question a lot, like, how do you do it all and homeschool your kids on top of that? And I guess the answer is my life is filled with things that I want. It's things that I want to do. I want miniature goats. I want fancy chickens most of the time. I want 3 kids. I want to work with my husband. We found our secret sauce, the thing that, I do my part, and he's like, I love that. And then he makes it come to life. And I'm like, I love that. It works for us. So it's a lot of things, but it's a lot of balance too. So if I need to slow down, actually going out and watering my fruit trees or feeding the animals is a nice way to decompress. And I guess I don't see, it's my mindset really, that I don't see them as impossible. Sometimes it's a little bit kooky, there's a lot going on, but it's all things that I want to do. And I just try to keep that in mind, that I'm living the life that I want, and move forward from there.
That's so awesome. So I want to get to the nitty-gritty of homeschooling. And I think the thing is where we are right now, people are starting from zero. They know nothing. They've been doing public school or private school, and they're like, I need to get into this, but I don't know where to start. So can you just help us get on that train easily? How do we do that?
Sure. I think the extra in all of this is that people aren't sure where to start because it's either blended learning, that's one path. Remote learning, is that what they're calling it, which is another path, and then homeschool, which is another path as well. So the blended, your hand is going to be really guided in all of that, and it's kind of like a part-time at home, part-time at school. And I think that there's going to be a lot of support from the teacher in that particular way. The distance learning, I think that a lot of parents end up feeling like they're all alone. Even if they have awesome teachers, there's a lot of figuring this out and what it looks like. But that's also following somebody else's curriculum and their timeline. And it didn't go well for a lot of people, and it could have gone well for certain teachers, not well for others. Awesome for some parents. Other parents were like, get me out of this ASAP. We need something different. And then there's homeschool, which isn't necessarily following a school's curriculum, and it is a lot more flexible, and the parent is very involved, and it's more like an hour a day, between 1 and 4 hours, depending on the age and grade of the child. So, if you're doing the distance learning or the blended learning, you might be given a certain amount of work to do. And who knows, based on teacher to teacher, how much time in your day that's going to take up. So I like the freedom of the full homeschool path personally, so that I can set my schedule, work at my pace, work at my child's pace. And if we're having an off day, I can just say, nope, we're not having any Zoom meetings. We're not having this. We're not having that. We're just taking the day off, and that is okay. So I think that that's the first part that people are trying to sort out. So I hope that that kind of helps explain, that adding in just that choice alone is a lot of overwhelm. So if people are wanting to choose the homeschool path, I think the very first thing to do is to start following other homeschoolers on Instagram or Facebook. And I know that sounds wild, but the reason for that is a lot of us, I was raised in public school. I'm a graduate of public school. I have a bachelor's degree and a couple of master's degrees, but my idea of education was that classroom setting. And a lot of people see homeschool as trying to recreate the school setting in the home. And most of us long-time homeschoolers will tell you that is not the case at all. That's not what we're trying to do. I guess I should clarify too. I did homeschool another family's children before my own. So that's how I've had lots of homeschool experience, for the record, because it's like, wait, you only have a 6-year-old? How does that work? It was another family, and I learned a lot from them. And thank heavens I got to go first with somebody else's kids.
Okay, so years of experience there.
Yeah. So I've been following these people for years. They've shown me through pictures, through comments, through beautiful imagery, through beautiful messages of support and sisterhood and understanding what homeschool actually is. So if you want to know more about it, start following the homeschoolers, and then you can see for yourself visually, especially if you're a visual learner, what it can look like, what modern homeschool is actually about, because most parents will picture homeschool and they'll see their kids sitting at the table, refusing to fill out a worksheet, and the parents standing over their shoulder, looking down at them, super frustrated that their kid won't do it. And your kid doesn't want to be there and doing that. And you don't want to be there and doing that. And that's not what homeschool is at all. That's not what it is. And it's more about connection. But if you don't have any reference point at all for what it looks like or could look like, it's really hard to get started, because you could be bogged down by the thousands of resources, thousands of curriculum to choose from. So if you can narrow it down and have other families help you figure out what your homeschool style is. There are so many different.
What's a style?
Are you a Christian family? and you want a Christian curriculum? Are you wanting a non-religious space or secular curriculum? If you start off with just those two and separate out which one you might want to be. So even though, for example, even though I'm consider myself Christian, I do not teach from a Christian curriculum. I choose secular and bring in religion and spirituality separate from the curriculum. So if you can start off with just those two, your choices are going to be cut in half, and you start paring it down from there. Are you more of an unschooler? And more child-directed learning, does that appeal to you, or is your initial reaction that seems irresponsible? Either way, whatever your reaction is, look into it, find out what it actually is instead of guessing what it might be. You can start paring down from there. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on, but it starts off with that Christian or religious in general versus secular, which means not religious, and then just go from there. You might find that you're more Charlotte Mason. I know people are going to be like, what? Charlotte what? She was an educator who has an education philosophy, a lot like Maria Montessori, the Montessori way. Do you admire Montessori? Have you always wanted to check that out, but maybe couldn't send your kid to the private school, to do that? This might be your chance to dive into that with a homeschool curriculum. You can pare down from there. Waldorf, does that intrigue you? Does it inspire you? Are there elements you want from that? Or are you like, nope, I want to be really heavy on certain academics? Once you start thinking about what's important to you, what ideas are out there, and it all starts with following people online. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes, yes. I know some of my friends have asked other friends who were already homeschooling. And so that's a head start, because I think if we start from zero and we're like really looking at all of them, it's overwhelming. So I love that you can borrow ideas and see where you're at with other people's experience. So that's great. And then, so once we figure out our curriculum, I guess it's just going down that road for a while, then what's the next thing?
Oh gosh, figuring out what homeschool and teaching your kid actually looks like. Because again, it's not you standing over them and, barking orders at them. It's not you and your children being super miserable all day long. It also doesn't look like you taking all day to school your kids. My days go anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, depending on how into it we are. Most days I can teach all 3 kids in 1 hour, everything that we need to learn for that day. And it's shifting your mindset and how you approach it, because if you think about a school setting, because immediately some people are like, I just can't picture that. Because why are they at school for that long during the day if I can teach them in an hour at home by myself? Well, a lot of schools, brick and mortar schools, they're called, is crowd control. It takes a long time to get 25 kids to line up, go to the bathroom, wash their hands, get a drink of water, whatever it is that happens these days, or go to lunch. It just takes a long time to transition a lot of young people at the same time. So most of the day is about crowd control and management and figuring out from there. When it's just you one-on-one with your child, it takes a lot less time to get through a lot more. And you can also teach them different subjects and topics that are based on their interests. So learning about what homeschool is like, I think after you kind of choose your curriculum and start to narrow that down, figure out your homeschool style, is learning how to teach them. And I have 2 book recommendations for folks. And one is called The Brave Learner by Julie Bogart. And this book is all about mindset and kind of breaks down not only how you could think about homeschool, but then the pragmatics of it, like staging the home for success, how to think about homeschool and planning and writing things down and what counts as homeschool. You'd actually be really surprised at how much your child is learning without a worksheet. And so Julie Bogart, she's actually going to be on my podcast next month, and I'm super stoked about that. The other book is, my kids took off the cover, but it's called The Call of the Wild and Free by Ainsley Arment. And she is the founder of a homeschool support group and resource called Wild and Free. They have monthly publications of articles that are put out to families all over the world. I actually write for their bundles that they send out, and it's just, it's so magical and so inspiring, and it's like a great monthly reminder of why we're doing it. But she really breaks things down, and she had sent her oldest to public school and then talks about that transition as well. So I think it kind of comes down to learning how to homeschool your kid and what that does and doesn't look like. And that's going to involve parents doing a bit of a reframe and letting go of a lot of ideas about what education looks like. So both Ainsley and Julie have podcasts. One is called Wild and Free. The other is called The Brave Writer with Julie Bogart. And they are excellent, excellent, excellent resources as well that will talk you through all kinds of things, because if you have a concern about homeschool, there is another parent out there who has had the exact same concern as you. And so resourcing yourself and learning about what it actually means to homeschool, I think is the next logical step.
If someone wanted to be literally walked through how to homeschool, they could take your webinar, is that right?
Yeah, it's a webinar, an online course, whatever you want to call it. It's called Homeschool Explained, and I have taken over 10 years of my homeschool experience and pared it down to 3 hours. Homeschool Explained walks parents through everything they need, from defining what all the homeschool styles are, helping them discover what style is best for their family, curriculum, subjects, state laws, lack of confidence, feeling like we're not enough, family members being like, you're crazy, you've lost your mind, we don't support you, and then having that onto all the rest of it too. And so I talk about all of that and so much more: socialization, planning, scheduling, all of that. I list all my favorite resources, the ones that are just rock solid and really well known in the homeschool world too. And then there's also a 27-page PDF that goes along with it too, that people can download right all over. It's got all the resources listed, the books, the podcasts, all of it. And then next month on Elevating Motherhood, my podcast, I'm going to do 10 episodes about homeschool. I want to be that voice talking in people's ears and just encouraging them. And I want to introduce them to the homeschool greats, people like Julie Bogart, people like Pam Barnhill, people like Greta Eskridge, so that they know that they're out there and that they know that those are super solid resources that they can tap into on all levels, from the scrolling on Instagram level, which, you get a lot of ideas from that, all the way up to the books and the courses and the curricula that they offer as well too.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. This is just so wonderful that you're here. I'm so glad I connected with you. So I have to ask you, where are you zooming off to now?
I'm actually going to go plant fruit trees. I'm going to change out of my dress, take off my earrings, and I have been putting that off. Yeah, I'm going to tap into my farmer part of me and just take a break, I think, with my kids.
Really nice.
And it counts as homeschool. We're going to do plant identification.
Oh, how perfect. Yeah, incorporate life, right? Into
exactly.
Your lessons.
It's all together. Yeah.
Totally. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you some other time. Maybe we'll have you on again.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Lori Beth makes it seem so easy and so fun. So let's hear from another mom who's been homeschooling for decades. Let's bring Gail Nagasako into the Zoom room. Hi, Gail. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I brought you in here because you wrote the book on homeschooling, why and how. And also real life parenting. And I thought maybe we could talk with you to help people navigate, how do you look for options? What creative situations are there out there? And what's good for your individual child?
I have a 37-year-old son, and his first day of school, well, he went to a tour of school when he was 13 to see whether he liked it, and he decided, nope, this is not for me. I don't want to spend all day doing that. And then he went to school when he was 16. So I homeschooled at a time when the first thing I'd be asked was, is that legal to homeschool? Because nobody was doing it. So little by little, we read things and connected with other parents um, via magazines and such to be able to have some confidence that we weren't ruining our child's life.
Say, how can we navigate now with the situation at hand, and how did you go about it, and then what did you learn, and what can you impart to us as far as how do we do that? How do we figure out what our child needs and what's out there?
Well, there's as many answers to that as there are families, because every family has a different approach. Every family has a different background, what they came from, how much they worry about keeping up. My feeling is that the place to start is with trusting your child. That they'll show you what they need to learn. If you plan on your child staying with a standard curriculum, there are loads of them. My website, by the same name as my book, has a lot of different resources with curricula that a parent can get. And then there's also what they call umbrella schools, where the child will enroll in that school, and that it's accredited, and the school works with the Department of Education and with the principal and such. So you don't have any of the paperwork or any of the worrying about what the school's got to say about what you're doing, and you just tell those people what you're doing. And then they write up what you did in a way that fits the laws of your state. Of course, here in Hawaii, we've got great rules here in Hawaii. They're very relaxed about how you comply with the homeschooling laws. And then there's people who just let their kids run around in the woods all day. And even those kids, when they go back to school, do just fine, because when they do go back to school, they realize they've had a choice all along. And now they're in school generally because they want to, and they've worked it out with their parents. And now this is something different to learn about. Instead of the woods, they're learning about school. So there's an entire range, and each parent has to figure out what fits who they are and who their child is and what their child is asking for.
So you're saying we don't have to worry about what they're calling the COVID slide. The COVID slide being fallen back in our academic, levels because of this COVID time. And so that you can just relax about it. I think that's something that really parents need to know, is that you can relax and not worry so much.
Totally. The thing to realize is in school, they have to keep kids busy all day. And so they have this curriculum that's 30 kids or maybe 20, and a private school maybe less. And they all have to be on the same page all the time, or it's just chaos. And at the end of the day, all of you know as well as I do, that we forgot almost everything we learned in school. What we remember is what was useful. Mm-hmm. So let's just start with what's useful. And by the time your child goes back to school, maybe your class was studying imports of Paraguay and your child missed that. But now they're studying Rome. So, yeah, I had not heard that term COVID slide, but keeping up has always been an issue in homeschooling, and knowing, what if my child goes back to school? Are they just going to look dumb and look like misfits and all that sort of thing? Mm-hmm. And another thing that I think is important is when a child wants to learn something that the parent doesn't know, and that's a concern sometimes for people. I don't know this subject. How can I teach my child? And to me, that's the perfect situation for teaching, because what you really want to teach your child above all else, well, besides kindness and values, is how to find something out that they don't know. And so you can go seeking that with your child, and so you role model learning. Of course, most kids now with computers, they're pretty good at finding things out for themselves, but it is a good thing to be able to role model as a parent. now with the computer, the whole rethinking education you were talking about, we don't have to fill our minds full of facts because they're right there on our phones or with our Alexa in our living room. Hey Alexa, what's this? Or what's the definition of that? You're reading your Kindle and you just click to get the definition of the word. Mm-hmm. So it's more how to relate to people, how to create, how to make it a better world, those kinds of values that you can just live as a family that you can focus a lot more time on now.
If you're going to be homeschooling in the way that you said, relating these lessons to, say, everyday things that you're doing, driving or boogie boarding or skateboarding, that the parent would need to be quite involved and also a creative mind. I mean, to really take life lessons and say, okay, there's this curriculum that I see that they maybe need to do based on whatever they need to keep up with. And then say, how can I take that and put that in the real world? So we go do that, which for some parents may be challenging because it's not a book that's saying, go do this lesson now, take them here, right. Go find shells and put them in a certain diorama, like that. And so does it take a certain kind of person, a parent who can homeschool their child?
Well, doing it that way, it does take a creative person to do it with no curriculum, no worksheets, none of that. And there's hardly any parents who ever do it really totally that way. I use worksheets too. Like, I'm busy. I'm here, do this worksheet, and or do this, or we did a lot of crafts was what we did. So, I think that brought out a lot of creativity. He's a professional videographer. But part of the editing, his fingers just fly over the keyboard when he's editing. It's like faster than I can type. And pieces are moving around. I think a lot of that is because of all that hand-eye stuff that we did when he was younger. Who knew that that's where it would lead? You never know. You just see this child's interested in this. So you do it. And the next thing you know, they've built themselves a career. There's too much material and parents get the idea, oh, what should I do with my third grader? And you look at that book or any of those like that, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. My kid will just be a total failure. And none of that's necessary to do that kind of detail with your child. It's like life. Sometimes you just got to put one foot in front of the other.
I'm sure people have asked you about addressing the fears that some parents have about homeschooling. What are some of those fears, and what do you tell people about answering those questions?
Well, I think the main fear is keeping up, which we kind of already covered, and socialization. And that's a problem right now for all the kids. If I were doing it today, because when we did it, we did twice a week field trips. The kids had play dates all day long while the other kids went to school. And then they play with the school kids when the school kids were out. And in the summer, we wouldn't see our kids. We were so glad when the other kids went back to school so that we could have some time with our kids. And the homeschoolers could get back together, where now it's a real challenge. So I think if I were going to be doing it now, I would create a bubble of, I don't know how many families, a certain number of families with kids that, liked each other, and really make some kind of a pact to be, we're going to be totally safe. We're always going to wear a mask. We're always going to social distance. So that you can trust like you would within your own household.
In looking at the big picture of this, it seems that you're saying to parents, really just don't worry. There is a lot of fear around education for parents that people nowadays hold. And I don't know if that's common, but it seems like it's such a thing. We care so much that our children are educated and that they'll become something and they will go somewhere and reach their potential. And so what I hear you saying is that we don't need to be so worried. And maybe you have some words about that.
Well, I'm saying you're going to worry no matter what. I mean, especially on the mainland where your kids are going through metal detectors. Worry is a part of parenting. Your daughter goes off on her first day, you're worried. There's just the kid climbs up in the tree, you're worried. You have to, on one hand, accept a certain level of anxiety about parenting and about education in general, not just education in particular. But as far as education, I was mentioned, but when we were talking before, I grew up in a university town. Of course, I would go to college. Of course, I would get good grades. Of course, I would have a good career, like a teacher, a lawyer, doctor, whatever. So I kind of had that expectation for our son when we started out. But I looked at both his grandpas. One ran Nagasako supermarket over in Lahaina and mostly worked in the butcher shop. My dad supervised Argus camera construction line, and then he sold real estate. I'd be really proud to have my son grow up to be like either of those men. So some of it is not thinking that our child is not going to be a success if he doesn't turn out to be a doctor, lawyer, or whatever, teacher. Of course, we want him to have skills that are marketable so he can support himself or herself. But that's so easy with homeschooling because that's what they're doing the whole time is learning skills. It's relating to the child in front of you. Mm-hmm. And just, like I say, taking one step in front of the other and not worrying that about what has to be a destination. Before we go, can I say, hi, Jennifer, if you watch this, I love you.
Thank you so much. Okay,
right.
Bye, Gail.
Aloha.
Aloha. Okay, to wrap it up, what we're hearing from all the experts is to take a deep breath and trust that we can do this, whatever schooling option you choose. And to let you know, there are many other alternative options out there. There are wonderful teachers, caring people who are starting their own thing in Maui just now, but there's just too many to list. So check out the Maui Mommies Facebook group where you can find that. Just do a search for alternative schools and you'll find a lot of options. Okay, and now for our Actions of Aloha segment. These two surf moms came in together in the beginning of summer to offer free cooking classes with your kids while we were all stuck at home. Michelle and Maha were so generous to put these on to help us to do something productive and fun with our kids. So we'll wrap up the show with these sweet time to cook kids with your photos. See you next week.